I think that there will be a rising work stream in the international community the rest of this year looking ahead, looking at solutions other than a two-state solution. That has been a mantra for the last generation. It's logical, but it's not practical right now. So we need to think again. And I think there's a possible role for the UK to look at the fundamentals and envisage solutions other than the two-state solution.
There is a mood, it's said, of cautious optimism. At least that had been the general sense about the prospect of a new Gaza ceasefire. But there's been a change overnight. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Hamas have made unacceptable changes to the plan which was being presented by the key mediators, Qatar, the United States and Egypt. As ever, it's not quite clear what that means, but Hamas is now demanding a guarantee that hostilities won't resume if talks fail for a permanent truce. So talks are continuing in Qatar. But tomorrow, all eyes are going to be on Washington, D.C., where Mr. Netanyahu will arrive for his third meeting in 6 months with President Donald Trump. Let's speak now to Simon McDonald, who is a crossbench peer, Master of Christ College, Cambridge, and of course was head of the diplomatic service, the Foreign Office. Hello to you.
Good morning, Adam.
Now, where do you assess where this peace process or this end game in Gaza is now?
That it doesn't much look like an end game. Looking coolly at what is going on, I think the most significant block is within the Israeli cabinet. The two key members are fundamentally opposed to having any kind of ceasefire, and they are making themselves felt. This is Ben-Gvir and Smotrich.
There is a suggestion that Netanyahu might actually call an election to get a majority in his government so that he can press ahead. Do you see any chance of that?
Mr. Netanyahu is dominating Israeli politics right now. He has quite a stable coalition. If he didn't like the policy being imposed upon him by the religious Zionists, he could remake his coalition even within the existing Knesset. So I'd be surprised if he calls a general election. A general election, if nothing else, introduces uncertainty. So I would expect this to run to the end of its mandate next year.
Now, Donald Trump did say that he felt very positively about this week. He said there could be a ceasefire this week. What has gone wrong in your view?
As I say, I think the Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are undermining it from within the Israeli coalition. Mr. Netanyahu will have to explain that in Washington, but the backdrop to his third visit in 6 months is very strong for Mr. Netanyahu. The joint US-Israeli raids against the Iranian nuclear program are a feather in the cap of both men in their assessment. So they have a close and successful relationship, and I would expect Mr. Trump to listen carefully and sympathetically to Mr. Netanyahu.
I mean, one of the sticking points seems to be that the Israelis have said, well, we could have a 30-day or a 60-day ceasefire, but the Hamas are demanding an absolute guarantee that it will be a permanent ceasefire.
Yeah, but Adam, that's all very curious. I mean, in diplomacy, there's no such thing as permanence.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Hamas is being unreasonable there.
Well, but therefore, I don't believe that is actually the thing that's blocking this deal, because no Hamas negotiator actually believes that if there were an apparent agreement to permanence, that it would be worth anything down the line. So it feels manufactured. It feels convenient to Mr. Netanyahu. I think if the Israelis wanted to do this deal, the deal would be done.
Is there anything that Britain and the British government could do to increase pressure on Israel?
Not much. I think that clearly we're not one of the intermediaries, but we are in touch with all the parties. So its influence exerted through other players. But right now, with the rest of Europe, we are marginal to what is happening.
We do have some sanctions on individuals, I think, including the ones you've mentioned. We also
Indeed.
have some sanctions on arms supply. Critics of the government say that we're still selling Israel arms. Is that fair?
I think it could be revisited. It could be tougher, but you're asking about effective intervention. Israel seems pretty impervious to outside lobbying, apart from American lobbying.
Is there an analysis, bearing in mind, frankly, the relative passivity of Arab nations and nations in the region, and, as you mentioned, the success or the fact of the raid on Iranian, bombing of Iranian nuclear facilities, that Israel under Netanyahu is succeeding in redrawing the political map of the Middle East, almost with the connivance of other Arab nations?
I think Mr. Netanyahu has had, by his lights, a very good year. That most of his enemies have been damaged or even destroyed. Hamas is very weak. Hezbollah is even weaker. The Houthis are not causing the trouble they were a year ago, and Iran is back in its box. So, yes, I think that's Mr. Netanyahu's main claim before his own electorate and with the President of the United States. He is looking as strong as he has ever done politically.
I mean, to that end, shouldn't the humanitarian priority for countries such as ourselves be rather concentrating on what happens next, what is actually going to happen to Gaza, and indeed what is happening on the West Bank?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, Israel, we have to keep two quite distinct things in our minds at the same time. Israel's right to exist, Israel's right to self-defense is absolutely there and respected. But what Israel is doing in Gaza and to an extent the West Bank in defense of that right is, I think has crossed a line. And I think that should be part of the conversation. What has happened in Gaza since the initial ceasefire broke down is horrific, and we have to have an honest conversation about that.
Is it really still viable for the world to stand back and say, well, we support the idea of a two-state solution, when it seems... I mean, I've just got one comment coming in from James, sent me a message saying there's never going to be a Palestinian state. How do British politicians not get that? The ship has sailed. He's got a point, hasn't he?
Yes, I think that there will be a rising work stream in the international community the rest of this year looking ahead, looking at solutions other than a two-state solution. That has been a mantra for the last generation. It's logical, but it's not practical right now. So we need to think again. And I think there's a possible role for the UK to look at the fundamentals and envisage solutions other than the two-state solution.
Do you have any idea? Could you sketch out what you think those other solutions might be?
Yes, but they're not in the confines of this short interview, Adam. But it is something that acknowledges that Israel will have continuing legitimate security interests in Palestinian areas, even when Israel has withdrawn from those areas. So what Palestine might have is something less than a state, but more than the occupation they have right now.
Now, as you know, there's a state visit by President Macron to the UK this week. There was some talk a few months ago that this might coincide with a joint recognition of Palestinian statehood. Do you think that's still viable at all?
Well, I would urge very strongly against that. I think a recognition of a Palestinian state would be gesture politics. And I personally don't see the point of that. It's a news headline, but what happens next? What would the United Kingdom and France do to show their support for the state of Palestine? And from where I sit, I can't see anything practical. Therefore, I would urge both governments not to do this.
So, for the time being, the war goes on.
Indeed. But Mr. Trump is the outsider with most influence. As I say, what has happened in Gaza since the since the initial ceasefire broke down is terrible. I think Mr. Trump and his advisors see that. So what are the remaining military objectives of Israel in Gaza? I cannot personally see them. So this needs to come to an end. The remaining hostages and bodies of hostages need to be given back, and there needs at least to be a long pause. Mr. Trump is the person best able to make that case.